Ladies and gentlemen of the internet, welcome back to the podcast. This is episode 3. We had to bring you one. I know we've done probably a few consistently or back to back to back, but really today is all about talking about the market because there's a lot going on. If you're on the CT sphere or the crypto Twitter sphere, a lot of people are calling for the top already right at the start of 2025. And we're here to discuss everything related to our portfolios and then just have some back and forth conversation about the markets in general. Again, some of the things that have been going on from a macro and more of the crypto degen niche.
Yeah, hope everyone's doing well today. Enjoying some of that playoff football. But yeah, we're going to start us off here with a quick little pulse check, right? So, Dante and I were discussing this earlier today, kind of where we're at, where everyone kind of feels we're going over these next few days, few weeks, right? And I know everyone's a little nervous. All coins are bleeding, Bitcoin's coming down, can't seem to get above 100K again. What's going on, right? We said we're in a bull run. We said we're have potential super cycle, right? All these narratives that are going on X, et cetera, right, that are trying to pump everyone up. So we just want to kind of do a quick pulse check here and kind of bring everyone back to base. So when you're really looking at the situation, where do we think the economy is going to go, right? So in last week's episode, we were talking about global liquidity entering the market and where we think we're going to be within the next year. So we kind of want to think of this from the macro picture, right? The money printers have to come on. The US government has a ton of debt that needs to get refinanced. Other countries do too, right? I know China is looking to turn on their money printer as well. Right now, we currently have a very, very strong dollar. I remember I went out to Banff, Canada over the summer. And when I was there, I was looking at basically a US dollar was worth, I think, a little over $1.20 in Canadian. Eating, traveling, it was an awesome experience and it was all at a discount, right? Since then, the Canadian dollar has only weakened, right? So you can actually go to Canada right now and have a phenomenal trip. And this is continuing to happen globally, right? It's not good. And for those that aren't familiar with why the US dollar being so strong isn't good, right? As Americans, you think, hey, like I can go over here and I can spend all this money and it's going to be great for my vacation. Yes, it is. However, when it comes down to things like manufacturing, right? Trump is going to come into office and he's going to want to bring those manufacturing jobs back to America, right? Like that's what he's running on. He's pushing tariffs in place to try and promote. Like if you build this in this country, well, guess what? We're going to tariff it so that it's not financially plausible for you to essentially build in another country and then ship it back to America at a lower price, right? He wants to use those tariffs to make sure that it's just as competitive to manufacture here in the US. The US dollar impacts that, right? A strong dollar. Why would you pay someone here $20 an hour, right? When you can pay someone $5 in a foreign currency, and guess what? The exchange rate for US dollar is worth $1.50 in that country, right? So the strong dollar only impacts manufacturing in the US. It only pushes companies to do things overseas, and that's not good. If you're a country, say like for example, you already have an inflation issue, right? I was just talking about Canada, so you're talking about another country where the US dollar is so much stronger than your currency. Now you're going to print additional money, right? You're going to turn that money printer on. You're going to kickstart inflation even further than where it currently sits, right? So you're only going to impact your own spending power. You're only going to improve the spending power of the dollar. And all of this is negative, right? It's negative for the US and bringing manufacturing back. It's negative for the people in those home countries. It's negative for people traveling globally, right? If you're coming from one of these countries and you want to go visit Europe or you want to visit the US, well, guess what? You now work for X amount of dollars. Your salary is now getting degraded because you're spending it in your hard-earned income in another country where your dollar is going a lot less, right? It's not getting you that distance. So all of this has to get corrected. Trump knows it, right? We all know it. All these countries, these big countries like China, US, Russia, right? Everyone knows the game. They know that we don't want to tank the global markets, right? We want everything to stay in that equilibrium where it's balancing out. And that's really, really good news. Because if you're not familiar with it, when the money printer comes on, right, when interest rates come down, what does that do? It promotes growth within the economy, right? So, businesses, large corporations like Amazon, et cetera, right? What they're doing is they are using low interest rates, and they are using that money to take loans and build things, right? And when they have to pay a higher interest rate, just like an interest rate on your home or your car, it's going to cost you more money, but your salary stays the same, or their revenue stays the same. It's not ideal for them to expand, right? So you see that growth when interest rates come down. That's when those companies start essentially coming back in and trying to expand on things and taking risks that they might not have otherwise taken if the interest rates were lower. And so it all comes in that circle, right? Everything's connected. The global markets are connected, moving billions, trillions of dollars globally, right? We can't have one of the major players like China, for example, start to see heavy inflation and their markets go down without it impacting us. And obviously, the U.S. impacts everybody. We're not going to refinance our debt here in America when we see these interest rates so high, right? It's going to crush us. So there's a lot of things coming into play that are going to spark one, interest rates coming down, and two, the money printer coming back on. And that is absolutely great for the crypto and the stock markets going hand in hand. So Raul Powell, you're going to hear me reference him a lot. You know, he talks about this a lot, and he talks about how we really just need to kind of sit on our hands in the moment right now, right? Like, don't get scared out of your positions is what he was phrasing it as. You want to stay positive. Look how fast Ethereum, Bitcoin can move, right? I think maybe about a month ago, we wicked from the 100, a little over 100K, we wicked all the way back down to 92K. Within 15, 20 minutes, we shot all the way back up above 95K. We put in that 108K all-time high. These things can happen so unbelievably quick. There's sell orders and buy orders going up and down, leverage trading, right? There are liquidations going on. So if you're just a entry level crypto investor, right? And you're like, hey, all this doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand why I bought something last week and it's down a little bit. Just be patient, right? There's a larger picture going on that you don't want to necessarily be concerned about. You want to think about, hey, I invested what I can safely invest. And then from there, have that conviction, right? So we have that conviction, Dante and myself, right? We do think that this market is going to perform well over the next few
We
months
hope.
here. We hope, right? There's always risk. And, we're going to say that time and time again, right? You can't be involved in any kind of investment without potential risk, right? Unless you're buying like bonds or something like that. But everything comes with a risk. And if you want that high reward, which is crypto, you're not getting that 10x potential or even a 3 or 4x potential in a year without taking on a higher level of risk. That's just the name of the game that we're all playing. And if you're here listening to this or you're thinking of getting involved, you should know that.
Yeah,
So
I
I'll hand that
think.
over to you. Yeah, Dante, you want to
Yeah, I was
elaborate?
gonna say there's a lot to unpack there. I think long story short, you have to have a base case thesis for what you think is gonna happen in the market. Our base case thesis here is that global liquidity will rise, and there's multiple factors in play, including global liquidity, that will ultimately result in higher prices for risk assets. Now, obviously, Bitcoin is still considered a risk on, an asset that in risk on environments will perform well, but when the market is going into like a stage of deflation, et cetera, like obviously Bitcoin is going to be one of the first investments that most people will look to get rid of. That's just psychology. That's just how the human mind has done this in the past, but we can't say it's going to happen again. I think it's a lot of great points. I think where a lot of people in the crypto space, at least if you're really thinking about this in the right way, in my opinion, having the duality of saying like, yes, we believe that things are going to go up, but we also have the reality that if they don't go up, like a lot of crypto will suffer pretty badly. And at some point or another, there will be a large correction in the markets. At least that's just coming from my opinion here, is that things have been good for a while now. I think things have been, almost up only since 2023 started. People just didn't realize it, but things relatively have been going up for about 2 years now. So we are getting closer to a point where, at least in my opinion, especially with the riskier stuff that we'll talk about, like you're not going to want to hold those things. I think and let's go over these cryptos that we're talking about. So we're giving examples of them. I think there's certain ones in the market that we can talk about that we can say are, hey, like, I really have conviction in this. I'm willing to hold some through a potential 80% drawdown. Now,
Can you do me a favor? Can you pull up either Ondo, SUI, XRP, any one of these charts?
yes, we'll start
Uh,
with Sui.
yes. Do like maybe the last year. Pull up the yearly chart.
This is monthly.
That works too.
It's not a lot of history on this one, but
No, that's fine. But let's take a look at SUI, right? So if you're looking back here, wasn't too long ago that we were looking at SUI well below 50 cents, right? if you look at these levels, right? Was that 42 cents there back in October? If you're really looking at this chart here and you're saying, hey, last week, or just a few days ago, we saw SUI up towards $5.50. Now it's coming down towards $4.50, right? This is a huge, huge drop, right? If you bought last week, you're probably a little stressed right now. What's going on? Am I going to lose a bunch of money here? But you need to look at this from just a few months ago, right? You're looking at the SUI chart. This thing went from 42 cents all the way up to $5.50, right? For some people, this has done a 10x for them in under a year, right? A very, very strong return. I know I got in well below 50 cents on my first buy, and then I bought more below around the 80-cent level. So you are in a very, very strong spot. Even though there's a small dip, right? I don't think that this is anything to worry about. I think that we're seeing a lot of these hold pretty strong levels. I know I do have a few things in my portfolio. Dante, I'm sure you do as well, where you made 2x on it and it's basically back down to break even or maybe even below. But things like Ondo, Sui, XRP, they are looking so unbelievably strong. I think you could even argue Arrow in there, right? Like we were talking about Arrow back around, I think it was 9 cents almost when we were talking about it. So a lot of these major convictions, right, that we have for our portfolios this time around, we're basically looking at these and we're not stressing over this because we're up so much. There's been so much positive momentum, and it's not like this came crashing all the way back down to 10 cents, right? It did go all the way up to almost $3, right? And it would have been great to see it break $3, but sitting at $1, it's not that alarming considering the fact that it's still up almost over 10x from where we began to talk about it.
Yeah, I think the thing here is the reality is like, would you be buying a lot of these today with the understanding that the risk is even higher than when you obviously if you got a good entry into a lot of these, I don't think you have to worry because the whole point of getting a good entry into something is you now have the leverage of giving yourself more time to make a decision. I think where we're at now, obviously I don't think that we're at a top. I think the market is so reactionary and has a thesis for 2 seconds and then changes their mind and then freaks out when things aren't going in favor. Or if you bought Arrow at $2.40 when you could have bought it at 50 cents, like, yeah, you kind of deserve, unfortunately, what is happening now, which is a massive correction across the board, which was to be expected. Bitcoin went to over $100,000. Now, even though I feel like we've been going up for a very long time, I still don't think that we're done. And I still think there's way more juice in, granted, a small period of time, but I think there's still the most parabolic part of the cycle to come. But if you have, if you're still figuring out where to get in and what positions you want to have and you're, kind of unsure of what to do in the market right now, I think it's getting to the point where it's getting too late. Obviously, if you're in some of these ones that have done very well, you have more leverage. But the point is, even Arrow, like you said, Alex, we talked about this thing at 9 cents or whatever, and it's, it went to $2.40 and is now down maybe like almost 100% from then. Like, it's crazy how volatile these things are. So it's really hard to say like, hey, I'm gonna hold this for the rest of existence because I think the fundamentals are that good. I think that's the trap that people will get into later on in the cycle, and they'll end up getting wrecked. That's just my opinion. I'm not saying it is for these ones specifically, but I think overall, if you look at Bitcoin, Bitcoin has been the only thing that anyone can really be happy about holding over a longer period of time. I know there's Ethereum, Solana, those are exceptions to the rule, but realistically, most people would have done better just buying Bitcoin at 16,000 if they were lucky enough to get it, or even under 50K and just hold and have profits that are better than trying to chase like the next big altcoin or thinking that you have the potential to, because I think that's the trap that I fell into at a certain point in my career, we'll call it, in crypto, and it's one I'm trying not to fall into again, where the market works. There's so many dynamics to the market. There's so many things going on. It's even harder now to be early to things where realistically the probability of you finding that 1% that's going to be successful or whatever it is in the long run, it's very difficult unless you have, teams of people. And even then it's very difficult. All the data in the world is still difficult. So I think that's where I'm getting at with this is like, I still don't think it's the end of the market. I'm allocated for the opposite to happen. But on the more that the greed enters the market, the longer this goes on, the more I'm like, it's necessary to flush out some of this because it's not good for the space long term.
Yeah, no, I do think that's a great take, right? And again, coming back to it, I know we talked about this in our episode 1 and episode 2, right? This being our third episode here. We kind of separated the way that Dante and I think about the market, right? He allocates to fewer coins, I allocate to a lot more. He gets some smaller plays and rides them up, and he's done very well with that. I kind of buy into some of these mid to large caps and allocate heavily to them. But kind of coming back to them, right? Like, where do we think that they're going to go in the next 3 to 6 months? So, obviously, again, there's risk always, not financial advice. You need to do your own research. We're open to comments on our videos, right? We'll answer questions, all that good stuff about why we think we're making certain plays, or we'll break down some things that you want us to talk about as well. But overall, I do think that we have some really, really positive momentum, right? We have states that are now putting into, I think North Dakota and New Hampshire just added to the list this week, right? For putting in legislation to get their strategic state reserves. Stuff with Switzerland, right? Obviously, El Salvador continues to buy. The U.S. government is going to be a huge piece of this, right? If Trump comes in and he actually makes this strategic reserve go full steam, right? I know he wants to roll over the Silk Road or the confiscated Bitcoin that the U.S. government already holds to start that reserve. But if he starts acquiring more, it's going to start the rat race. Again, coming back to, I'm not going to rehash it, but in the beginning of this video, I really talked about the money printer coming back on, and why rates really need to come down, and why they need to continue to kind of bring down the dominance of the dollar globally. But there's just so much bullish news that's coming out, right? When you look at things like XRP2, things like Ondo, right? Ondo has their huge conference coming up. Goldman Sachs, right? MasterCard. You have a lot of these big players coming out, right? All these narratives, AI, real world assets, right? Or RWA, depends. There's just so much that's going to be coming at us, and I think in just a short amount of time, 2025, I do think we're going to coin it in history books as the year of crypto. I truly believe that. I think that, I know 24 was great. ETFs came out, things started pumping in billions of dollars, right? Speaking of billions of dollars, right? If you're looking at just the ETFs alone, right? Everyone's kind of freaking out a little bit, but we saw $312 million in net inflows across the ETFs this week, right? They are buying. So anyone that's kind of sitting here thinking, hey, like, what's going on? Like, blah, blah, blah. It's like the ETFs put in over $250 million into Bitcoin alone this week. That is extremely bullish, right? You have to take that into account. XRP ETFs are probably somewhere around the corner in 2025. I know Brad Garlinghouse is anticipating that. You have things like SUI, obviously sitting well above $5. I know they have a big marketing team, but these are things that are going to start to create momentum, right? People that weren't involved in this space in 2024 or were hearing about it and weren't taking it seriously, I think are going to start to take it very, very seriously this year. And I think it's going to excel a lot faster than anyone truly thinks it would have, from where they were looking at this market from like 2022 to 2023, right? There's always those people that are like, hey, $1 million Bitcoin. But I think overall, no one thought we would get to 100K this fast. Maybe if you're involved in crypto and you've been here for a while, you were. But if when you're talking about like governments, large financial institutions, right? I think a lot of these individuals are shocked at how well this has performed, and it's creating that rat race, right? Like, I missed out on the 15K Bitcoin. I missed out on the 50K Bitcoin, the 80. Now we're at 100, and they're scrambling. How do I get involved in this market before it goes up to 200, 300K?
And that's when the market tops, though. That when everyone's like, who do you think the people are who are going to buy it at the point where it's at $150,000? If you had the chance to buy it at 16,000 two years ago, it's not going to be and like, obviously the passive bid exists, which is the only thing that's genuinely the only thing that Bitcoin has now fundamentally, in terms of the difference between now and every other cycle, is that it has the passive bid of the ETF. It has the potential of states, and like you said, basically sovereign nations, anyone, basically a large whale that's not going to sell. All these entities, and then the passive bid are not going to sell. So Bitcoin has everything going for it. It is the most bullish we could have ever been for Bitcoin right now. For everything else, you have to be extremely selective. So yeah, Alex, I know we talk about, your or our investing, I guess the way we invest in crypto is slightly different, but realistically it's pretty similar because we're like 90% of our portfolios, if it's not Bitcoin, it's in, top 20 alts. We're assuming, and those are at that point, those are mid to high cap alts. And it's not that they're less risky, it's just that these are more proven than a lot of the rest of the stuff. For the 10, 15, 20% that are in, the really degenerate stuff, like, this AI stuff and things that are more kind of left curve, I guess you can call it. You have to be extremely selective with what you're actually going to put money into. And the reality is some of the quote unquote blue chips are not even performing this cycle. Chainlink being an example of fundamentally a great project that we all love. We've talked about it for years, but again, and it has the most fundamental bedrock of any of these crypto projects, yet it hasn't performed. And it's all about, where the attention is going. Solana's, a perfect example of all it is so successful because it is basically the house, right? The casino. It's where everyone goes to gamble and speculate, etc. And most of what people are doing in crypto right now is just hyper gambling, essentially. So I think all of those are signs of like a more late stage market, and we have to be aware of the fact that like a lot of this stuff is going to absolutely get destroyed. Like in the nicest ways. Like a lot of this will never come back. But I'm okay of obviously with the thesis that some of these altcoins will have long-term potential. If I didn't believe that, there'd be no point, spending all this time in this space trying to invest in it. But I think we're at a tough spot for a lot of people because I think if you've been in crypto and you still are struggling to kind of get your head around not chasing and not constantly moving from one thing to the other, by the time that the cycle's over, you're going to end up just holding bags. And I think for most altcoins, it's still going to be a normal cycle. I think Bitcoin clearly is in a league of its own, and it's performed that way. You can see the chart for Bitcoin against any other altcoin on the market, and Bitcoin is outperforming.
Yeah, no, I'm in pretty much agreement with you there on a lot of that. I know I personally will keep a small moon bag, as we call it, right, in crypto, just in case the market flies and somehow Bitcoin by the end of 2026 is 500K, right? I think I'll always keep a little bit of some of these big ones like Ethereum, maybe a little XRP, maybe some Sol, etc. But I'm in agreement with you there, right? Like you don't want to be holding things like Chainlink, Cardano, HBAR, like they're gonna tank if this market goes down, right? If we do see a top around 200 to 250K, and then we come back down towards 100, your bags are gonna get wrecked, right? So, and there's gonna be a lot of people that get involved late in the game, right? Retail is gonna come in heavily, I think, once we start to see that 150K level. And then once that happens, right, there's going to be too many people out there that are holding their bags thinking Bitcoin's going to go to 500K. And then they're going to find themselves in the hole down the line. And that's why we're asking all of you to kind of tune in here, right? So we're going to be giving these live updates weekly. I do think that we have a lot of good information to give each and every one of you and where we think the market's going, right? We do have a lot of key players that we analyze. And we're watching hours upon hours of content ourselves every week. So that's all getting compiled together within this podcast, right? You're getting Dante's knowledge, you're getting my knowledge, and we're gathering that also from external sources, not just between ourselves. So I hope we provide as much value to everyone listening to this podcast. But yeah, I kind of want to dive into the super cycle narrative here.
Of
I always
course
think
you
that's
do.
a fun one to kind of discuss, a super cycle scenario. And one thing, when we say super cycle, right, I think everyone just thinks Bitcoin to Valhalla, right? $1 million Bitcoin. And you need to think about it in terms of the long run, right? So where do you truly think that Bitcoin is going to go in the next 10 years? So let's even shorten it. Let's say by the end of Trump's presidency, so the next 4 years, if you think that Bitcoin is going to be at 500K within the next 4 years, right? Now, obviously, there's a good chance there'll be a recession within those 4 years, and you will probably see a massive reduction, and you probably won't be happy to see it.
Which
But
is what we're trying to avoid here.
which is what a lot of us, everyone wants to avoid, right? Everyone wants to kind of get in at a good entry price. They want to find this next local top. You want to sell out of it towards the top. You're never going to time it perfectly. And then you ideally would like to throw that capital back into the market during the recession, right? In hopes that when Bitcoin comes back down, you buy in, and then when it goes to 500K, you compound those gains, right? It's all about compounding year over year. That's what you want to see. But there's people out there that are just going to spot hold, right? They're going to buy Bitcoin and they don't care if it goes from 100K right now all the way up to 300K, back down to 100K, because they have that conviction that it's going to be 500K, for example, in 4 years, right? And they don't care how it gets there. They don't need the money. They're not using it for their family vacation. They're not using it to renovate their house next month, right? They are saying, hey, I'm going to use this money 30 years from now. And as long as Bitcoin's worth 500K to a million within the next 5 to 10 years, I'm happy. Right. I don't care how it gets there. And I think that's how you have to view that super cycle, or quote unquote, long-term bull run, whatever you want to label it as. But that's how you have to view it, right? Am I fine with holding through these insane dips? Because it's not like the stock market. And I think a lot of people get wrecked, right? We see it time and time again. People buy in the top, goes down. When you should be DCAing is at that time, right? That's when you should probably be adding to your position, trying to lower or your average cost, right, for that project. And what you see is people sell out. Next few days go by, the project's up again, and then you're lost, right? Now you have to buy again at the level that you entered at before, and you have a loss on your sheet there. It's not good. So you want to avoid that. You want to know what you're doing in this space, and I think you're going to get that content by listening to Dante and I here.
Yeah, I think so. The thing is, most people, especially probably the ones who are listening to us or the people who are really in crypto, they didn't buy Bitcoin. They don't own any Bitcoin, and so it's like
You should
we
always
all
own
wish.
Bitcoin.
We
I'm gonna
always
start off
wish.
there.
Yeah, exactly. You should. The point is, like, Bitcoin is the only thing that has proven itself. It's the only thing that has had longevity, realistically speaking. There have been other things you can argue that for, but realistically, is it an investment if you're storing your wealth in something that goes down 80%? I wouldn't say that's an investment. And I'm saying this from knowing very much that this happens all the time in crypto, and just knowing to not expect, or like to expect that, like, if you're going to hold on to anything that's not Bitcoin, or, let's say a select few alts, but I'm even hesitant to say a select few alts. Like, most likely you're going to want to get out before the top and get out before recession, because realistically you won't be able to afford that drawdown. And most people, unfortunately, and I think this goes into something we wanted to talk about, is kind of most people won't get out of this alive. And that's the sad part, is like, most people will either hold the top. None of us are going to be able to time a bottom or a top. It's too difficult to do so. And if you do, you're either a genius, 1% of the 1%, or you got lucky. And the thing is, there's people who are getting lucky and then thinking they're a genius. And then you see that the path forward from there is to be greatly disappointed when things go wrong. So I think we have good discourse in terms of, yes, long term, if any of you are actually looking that far ahead, then yes, crypto is the most obvious thing ever. It's literally the only thing where we can put money into that can hedge us against the fact that we have a monetary system that constantly relies on printing more money and constantly devaluing the dollar. The dollar will eventually, most likely, a lot of people think Bitcoin will become the world reserve currency, but realistically, the dollar needs to remain the world reserve currency. The only fiat currency that exists will be the dollar, and should be the dollar across the world, because fiat currency clearly doesn't work. It devalues. And the whole point is, we'll be on the dollar standard, and then that's what gives Bitcoin value. That's what gives crypto value, because eventually, what are you going to want to do when you've made $1 million on your Bitcoin? Hey, I want to buy a house. Hey, I want to do something nice for myself. Eventually, you're going to want to convert that into something. And guess what? It's going to be dollars. So the dollar will always have value thanks to blockchain, thanks to Bitcoin. For
Yeah,
everything else,
I'm gonna jump in there. Like,
yeah.
this whole mindset, I can't tell you how many times I see it. The US dollar, BRICS nations are gonna take over and create their own currency. It's all BS. I'm sorry. The US dollar is not going anywhere. It's way too strong. We're actually trying to bring the dominance down. It's that strong, right? Like, think about that concept. No one's gonna replace it. It's going to be so tied to Bitcoin. There's gonna be so much US dollars in Bitcoin, right? And so much Bitcoin owned by these institutions within America that it's basically going to be owned by the US, just like any other major asset, right? So you really have to think about it from that standpoint, the US dollar. And like you were just saying, right, what I know, there's also some concepts out there like, hey, I want to go buy my house in Spain, and they're only going to accept Bitcoin 20 years from now. Like, that's I promise you they're going to accept your US dollars. So people are going to transfer that back into USD. Is Bitcoin going to become way more fluid? Like, can you probably use it to purchase things directly? Is it going to improve and get built upon? For sure, right? But at the moment, it's not realistic to walk into McDonald's and pay them in Bitcoin, right? It's slow. It's not convenient. I think that you're going to see a lot of companies try and take advantage, right? Like look at things like XRP, right? They're coming in, they're making their own stable coins. They're seeing how much faster it is to use RLUSD to make payments within seconds. They're partnering with Swift, the current system in place for that, right? Cross-border payments, etc. And you're going to start to see things just get built and built. I think you're going to see Bitcoin is going to stay that gold, right? It's going to replace the gold market cap potentially at one point, and I think that will be absolutely amazing. But are you just like gold? Are you walking around and paying people in gold bricks? No, right? It's not realistic. It's not quick. It's not simple. And so in terms of that long-term concept, right, you need to think of it that way.
Yeah, and the point is here, like the point I was trying to get to was Bitcoin is in a class of its own. We can say that there's other things that potentially could do the same thing that Bitcoin does, but it's not proven yet. And the probability of you being right about which one ends up doing that is very low. So yes,
Unless you believe in XRP,
unless you believe in
you already
XRP, and
found it.
that's the caveat I'll have, because you believe in XRP to that level.
Yep.
And so that's where, again, like, unless you truly find something that you believe in, I think at certain times I thought Caspa was that. At certain times I thought there's been many projects that I thought was going to be the next Bitcoin, and everyone wants to be in the next Bitcoin. But I think the longer I've been in the space, what I am realizing is like the more I try and think of what's going to happen next or try and predict what happens next, I'm always wrong. And most of the time you are going to be wrong. It's very hard. You can have a general
He's doubting himself
direction.
way too much there. He makes fantastic calls, so I don't know what he's talking about, but
yeah, but you're gonna make, that's the thing, is what I'm saying is like when you get lucky or you think that you've done something that has given you a return, essentially you've made money off of an idea or whatever, you have the risk of thinking you're a genius. And that's when the point is to mentally stay in this market and do well. And in my opinion, you have to constantly be telling yourself you don't know the next move, you're not a genius, and that's obvious. Like, I mean, if it's not obvious to you, it's obvious to me that I'm not a genius. So it's like, I know my probability, Dante's probability of guessing what's going to actually be successful in 10 years is very low. Honestly, it's very low. So you always have to be of the mind that, like, let's look at systems that have worked. And so, like, I think, listen, like, you're in the same boat, because it's not like crypto is your only asset. You own real estate, you own stocks, you own a bunch of things that came first before the crypto. For most people, it's like, they're looking at crypto and it's like, this is my only chance. And I understand that feeling, because for me, I'm in the same boat where I'm like, in terms of asymmetric opportunity, crypto seems to be that. But like, is this the time to be throwing all of your life savings into crypto because you believe that's going to happen? Like, I think it's incredibly risky.
no.
And
Nope.
the last thing I'm going to say on this before I give it back to you, Alex, is like, again, with what's been going on in the space in crypto the last couple of days. So if you didn't know, like artificial intelligence, that whole meta that's going on, it's seen huge drawdowns. Like we've seen the first sign of, weakness in the market for like the biggest protocols in AI. Look at them. They look absolutely terrible. We're seeing 50% drawdowns for virtuals. We're seeing pretty much a 50% drawdown for AI16Z, which are the two biggest infrastructure plays in AI. And then on top of that, we have some of the biggest and most influential people in the space, creating DAOs and basically trying to portray like this fair launch kind of environment for basically making millions overnight. Like founders and 5-10 select few making millions off of the community, making millions of dollars off of them, and then trying to convince people that we're going in a good direction. And so this is what I'm saying when I say, like, don't fall into the trap of anyone online or anyone telling you that, like, if you go into this or this opportunity, it's going to turn you into a millionaire. This is your one chance to get into it. Don't fall into that trap because of how greedy things are getting. I agree, Alex, you have a great perspective long term, and that's why you will, that's what's made you successful. I've been in places where I've been too focused on the day-to-day and how much money or what I'm trying to do on a day-to-day basis to maximize profit, and that's what gets you wrecked. And that's what I'm trying to kind of tell people to be careful of. But that being said, the last thing I'm going to say, the actual last thing I'm going to say is, because of the massive kind of ups and downs that crypto has, when things are down like this is the opportunity to be doubling down on the things you really do believe in. And that's for people who know what they're doing, meaning you've been in this space before and you're not just following what influencers say, and you have your own ideas. If you have ideas, this is the time to be doubling down, because we don't have much time left. And for me, that's AI. So yeah, Alex, you can take it from there, and what are you doubling down on essentially?
Yeah, and I think we'll wrap it up with this last point here. I like what you just said there. We're getting down to the wire, and I really do think that, and I know we've been saying that for a good amount of time here. Not just us in general, but a lot of major influencers have been calling for, the last window is closing here where you can really get some of these altcoins at a fantastic price. And with that comes the conviction, which is what Dante and I also believe in, is that we're going to have a good 3 to 6 months here. Again, not financial advice, not telling you to throw your life savings into altcoins. I would actually highly suggest you don't do that, right? If you want to stay well diversified, I personally, I own real estate, 401k, stocks, etc. Right? You want to make sure you're diversified, and you also want to make sure that you're never putting into the market what you can't afford to lose. But if you have that safe investment fund that you're like, hey, I can allocate X amount of money, and if it goes down 50%, I'm not going to be staying awake at night thinking about it. I do think that window is closing here to get some of these at a good price. So disclosure, right? One of my biggest holding is XRP, right? It's done phenomenally. I got a very large bag of it, well below 50 cents. So that's up, over almost probably a little over 5x now. So I would not suggest getting into XRP. If I was looking at something that I really, really liked in the moment, um, two or three that I would give. One would be Ondo. I think that when things turn around and Ethereum goes past 4K, especially with their conference coming up on February 6th, I think it's going to create a lot of momentum for it. I think it can double from where it's at pretty quickly. And then we'll continue to run very, very well if Bitcoin continues to push towards 150K. Euro, extremely volatile, Aerodrome Finance, but $1.07, that looks like a steal to me at the moment. A few others that I really, really like. LCX at 21 cents. Jupiter at 79 cents is unreal, right? It blew past well over $1 very, very quickly. And then, as always, CRV and CVX. And then one last one that I'm going to throw out there that I think is a really good play at the moment here is Stacks or STX at $1.50. Really flies up very, very quickly. Stacks, I think it's going to gain a lot of momentum this bull run. I think it's going to be something that a lot of people are talking about, and $1.50 is an awesome buy at the moment. Those are just a few of my plays. If you are questioning if we want more info as to why you think these are great projects, right? We can talk about each one of these in a lot of detail. So just for the sake of time, I'm not going to dive into them, but those are just a few that I think look primed for the risk versus reward and at current price levels, right? I obviously like things like Solana, obviously like things like Ethereum, things like SUI, things like XRP. But at their current levels, if you're looking for more than a 4 to 5x, I just don't think that you're going to get above them, right? If you realistically saw XRP go to a 5x from now, that puts it almost towards $15. Could it do it? Sure. Do I think it's going to do
Risk
it?
is too high.
It's
Risk
too
is too high.
high.
You can't be holding
Exactly.
it that long, and yeah.
By the time that it gets up towards $10, you're probably going to want. We'll probably be on this podcast a few months from now, if that's the case, telling you that like we're selling out a lot of our bags, right? So if that's what you're planning on and that's what you're forecasting, like, hey, I'm going to drop all this money into these projects that are up 5 to 10x already, something like Sui, right? A few months ago, it was below 50 cents. Now it was sitting over $5, right? Do I think that that's a project that I would invest more money into at this current price? The answer is no. So just some ways that I'm thinking about it, right? If you're looking for an easy 2 or 3x in terms of if Bitcoin really goes towards 120K, like yeah, they'll do well if Bitcoin does that. I'm not saying they won't.
But
I'm just saying,
we've seen, this is the thing, is we've
yeah,
seen Bitcoin go to 100K, and we've still seen things that have just completely stagnated, gone down, have shown very little strength. And I'm telling you, this is all I'm saying, telling you, telling everybody, is this was not the same in 21, 20, and before. Before, literally anything in the crypto market that you held, it was that easy, was going to go up if Bitcoin went up. There was no rhyme or reason to it because nobody understood fundamentally that what had value, what didn't. Now, Alex, you're a good guy. You got into the good thing, you got into the right things early. But for the guy who didn't do that, it's really difficult right now to say that I'm going to hold something for the next 6-12 months and hope I get it right. So that's the only caution I bring to that. But yeah, no, I agree with everything you said. And it's hard to say that like SUI, XRP, I think Ondo's the one that has the most
short-term potential,
short-term
especially
potential
with
because
this
it hasn't done
conference.
so. Hasn't done as
Yeah.
well as the rest of them.
I think you're going to see news about this conference all over the place, and it's going to really pump it. That's just my prediction. I hold a good amount of Ondo. I believe in it strongly, but again, not financial advice. Do your own research on it and where it's going. And I'm going to rephrase what I said. So these altcoins, like Dante said, this is a little bit of a different case where Bitcoin going up doesn't necessarily mean that altcoins are going to follow in the same way they did in prior cycles. I think they're more correlated to Ethereum, right? If Bitcoin goes to 120K, but Ethereum stays at 3,200. Yes, altcoins are not going to perform that well. But I think that if Bitcoin does go towards 120K, I think you're easily going to see Ethereum break 4K, and that's what will cause the altcoins to
Agreed.
move.
Yeah.
So if you see, and you're right? So look how much we went from 50K all the way up to 108K. And Ethereum is basically where it was, right? It hasn't gained and held a level. It went up towards 4K and it came all the way back down. So you're not actually like, if you bought in months ago, you didn't make any money, right? You're right back to where you entered. Now some of these altcoins like XRP, SUI have actually held very, very well, right? They've made their legs up, multiple legs, and they've held those key levels, and you're sitting very pretty. However, if Ethereum moves to 4, 5, 6K within the next 3 months, and we get that lucky, the altcoin market's going to rip. So that's just my prediction on the market. But yes, like you said, if Bitcoin goes up and Ethereum doesn't, then we're not going to see the alts rally.
Yeah, which I don't. All right, to finish this off, to conclude on my final thoughts on what I really think is going to happen, I don't think that Ethereum's not going to perform and that the altcoins are not going to perform. The whole point is just drilling it into people's brains because it's coming from a place of having learned this lesson or just knowing it from realizing like I don't actually know what's going on in the market most of the time. I'm just trying to have my best guess is that things are going to go up. Not everything's going to go up the way we would want them to. And people are diversified to the point or trying to catch every single thing because they think that it's similar to prior cycles where everything did catch a bid and everything went up. But I think liquidity has really spread out and moved in the directions of actual fundamentals and just, things that work. But finally, I will say like that where I'm allocating, if it's not to SUI, if it's not to ETH or, the what I'll call the almost the guaranteed movers at this point because they've shown their hand, the ones we've talked about. If I'm not allocating to that, I'm specifically allocating to AI because I just think like where we're at right now is we've seen the first major dips in the crypto XAI area. And I think people are shorthanding it and saying like, okay, this is potentially over. This is my bet. This is my bet with, not a significant amount of my portfolio, but 10 to 15% of my portfolio is that this is going to get way bigger than anything else we've seen. It's going to be like DeFi from a couple years ago and the ICO boom from a couple years ago as well. Like this AI narrative is the one that's going to take off. So I'm allocating to hopefully do those kinds of insane returns that we're talking about in a very short period of time. But I'm not looking to hold all those things. I know most of it is vaporware. I understand that like most of even the community around it are just trying to enrich themselves at this point. So just all things to remember. And also that if you're 100%, like maybe it works out, but if you're 100% in crypto right now, I'd be afraid. Like I would be afraid every day waking up and fully allocating myself to crypto. It's just that risky. So
Yeah,
that's all.
I don't think anybody should be fully allocated to one thing, right? That's just like finance 101, right? Like personal finance. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket, right? No matter how much conviction, how much certainty you feel in a certain company, project, real estate investment, et cetera, right? Something can always go wrong, and you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have nothing else to lean back on. So completely in agreement with you there. I do think that in terms of time, we're probably pushing it here. I do think we gave a lot of valuable insight here, so I hope we get some good comments back and some other stuff that
If you're
evolves.
if you're insane,
Yeah, right. I would agree. Like if you're here still, you're probably someone that is taking your investing very, very seriously, right? If you're listening through this, because you have to find it interesting, you have to think to yourself that I want to find some understanding of this market and where it's truly going to go, right? If you're looking for someone just to shill you the next coin and say price is going up, right, or
Yeah.
price is going down, and to give you no reasoning, then this is not the channel for you. But if you're someone that wants to understand where the economy is going, understand why we have these plays that we're kind of discussing between ourselves, and where we think the biggest altcoin gains are going to be, and you made it this far, then congrats. And again, we're always looking for that communication, questions, comments, etc. Right? We're gonna get back to you. So I'm gonna end it there, unless you have anything else to put onto that, Dante.
No, I think just be with us through this journey, see how it goes. Yeah, and we'll be here regardless of if it's a green day, a red day. The whole point is like we're trying to be open about what we're doing. Again, that might mean that we're wrong a lot of the times, maybe not, hopefully not, and we're right. But also it's just to give you guys a sense of how a regular person is trying to do this and go through this, and not some random anon person behind a Twitter screen who's trying to like get you into their coin and dump on you. So yeah.
Yep. I will I'll be in Japan for the next few days traveling. Dante and I will try and give some updates along the way. If you're looking for day by day or more up to date info, right? X is where you're gonna get it. We're posting on there very regularly. So obviously these videos take us time to record and edit. But if you're looking for in the moment type of updates, definitely follow us over on X. That will be in the description below. And hopefully as we get closer, inauguration is just a few days away here. Hopefully we see these markets turn around and pump, and we're talking about green candles in just a few days here.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, right?
that's the hope.
Nice.
All right, well, I guess two bros,
Two bros, one blockchain.
we're out.
Have a good one, everyone.